Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now in today's video I have a specific topic in mind to go over. This is mostly just to help those who have more than one ship and they're not necessarily sure how to transfer their build, whatever your build is, how to transfer that from one ship to another. Say your main ship for PvP, as an example, could be the Intel Dreadnought. And if you're just running around in missions, you want to do them a little bit quicker, maybe get around the map for objectives, make that a little easier. You want to use an escort. Well, how can you possibly take a Dreadnought build and put that into a little escort? That's what I want to cover today. So, the main aspect here, in terms of consoles, the way that this game works, most of the best consoles that you get are going to be universal. So, simulator console, Tachyokinetic, just as a couple of examples. I do have a lot of engineering on my Dreadnought, but let's say they weren't there. Most things would be interchangeable, so it wouldn't matter what the console layout of another ship was, you'd be able to transfer pretty much everything over without any thought whatsoever in terms of consoles. Equipment, this is pretty obvious. Your equipment goes on any ship, period. And in terms of weapons, you may find some ships can hold more, some ships can hold less. That, I would say, will be the only thing that's likely to change. The key difference is how do we fit bridge officer builds from, again, in this case, say a Dreadnought over to an escort. So on here I'm running my variation of an auxiliary power 2 battery build. So 2 Octobat, and this is the most essential part of this build. You must be able to have 2 auxiliary power to emergency battery. If you don't, you can't keep your bridge officer cooldown where you want it to be. And the cooldown, just in case you don't know, comes from these duty officers here, technicians. They don't have to be purple quality, but I'd recommend at least green or higher if you are going to use an Octobat build. Now, going back to the bridge officers, what you've got to do is you've got to note to yourself what are the key parts, what makes this work, and you effectively take the essential things and you put them on another ship. So for an Octobat build, the most important thing is that you're on a ship that has 2 engineers of at least lieutenant or higher, or at the very least a universal station. If you don't, this particular build can't be transferred. But you could always run something else instead and adapt it for that particular ship. Personally, I find virtually every D6 is capable of housing this kind of a build, some obviously better than others, because at the end of the day, a ship, in my opinion, is mostly based on its console layout and its bridge officer stations. Base stats, of course, do make a little difference, but this right here is the most important thing. So, Octobat, most essential part. Now personally I like to make sure I've got reverse shield polarity since it got its buff. It works really well for me. I use a torpedo, so I need to be able to fit either a torpedo spread 2 or 3. That's easy enough to compensate for. Fire at will, again preferably 3, but you can make do with a 2 if you absolutely need it. Now, I would say that the Intel Dread, when you're running 2 tactical stations, it does have one too many for me. I don't need 2 attack pattern deltas. I only need 1, because, as you'll see in a little bit, all my cooldowns are at global anyway. So having 2 copies of 1 skill doesn't actually matter, so that could potentially be changed. I did experiment with running it here instead, but I found having a 3rd engineer was less valuable than the fire at will or the torpedo spread. So this skill might be wasted, but I don't really care. So here, just so long as you can get at least 1 copy of your spread, your fire at will, they're your main damage dealing abilities, they're your effect buffs for your weapon types. 1 attack pattern, I would suggest at least. If you can get Chemosite laced weaponry, this skill is just awesome. And obviously attack team is mandatory on any build ever. has an emitter just because I have that science station, and that's the only thing I could think of that was of any use. Now, if I'm going to take this over, now I don't know if I've shown any actual gameplay with this, so I'll quickly run into a Japori, and then I'll switch over to an escort and show how this build transfers from a dread to an escort. And unfortunately the game's decided it's going to take a long time to load. If I'd have thought I could have come in here first and started the video then. Apologies, maybe next time. Right then, here we go. Got my buffs up. Cycle the camera out so we can see what's going on a little bit better. Yes, as you can see, my torpedo spread 3 actually outcycles the cooldown of my torpedo, because I can't reduce the cooldown of my torpedo, but I can reduce the cooldown of the skill. So that would be, for me, the only downside of having everything at shortest possible cooldown, is that for my torpedo spread, my ability to enhance the torpedo cycles quicker than my actual torpedo, which can be a little bit frustrating, but still I would rather have it there ready for every time my torpedo is ready to launch, as opposed to having to wait to use the skill, because a single torpedo on its own doesn't really do that much damage.
Congratulations.
Alright, let's get out of here. Change ship. And again with the loading screens. Okay, so let's quickly head over to Akmar. Now these two patrol missions, I like to cycle them A because they give you a little bit of dilithium, so if you've got 10 or more characters, they're a really quick way to go in, cycle through. It is extremely mind-numbing, but nonetheless, virtually any captain of level 50 or higher can quite comfortably do these quickly, and eventually it'll give you enough dilithium for your daily camp. But I would say that's only worthwhile if you have lots of characters to cycle through, because I think you only get like 800 for doing both patrol missions, so you will need to do it a lot of times. But if you've got a lot of characters, you can cycle through and get them all done. Alright, so let's go with a bug ship. I appreciate not everybody is going to have these particular ships, but the principle remains the same. They are two very different ships. So let's have a quick look at the stations. So here you'll see I have my arcs to bat, got my reverse shield polarity, I have my fire at will 3, and my spread 3. Now again, I have duplicate delta. This does not actually help at all, but never mind. It's an extra space. I was tempted to put Chemosite 2 on there, but I wasn't sure if that would really actually make any difference. Now, just quickly popping over, it'll let me to the console. So here, there's one less weapon because this is an escort, but it has a heavy weapon now instead. So there's one beam less. Wow, big deal. And a lot of the universal consoles that I use, well, even engineering and science specific, that I use on my Intel Dread, literally just copied over to here. And this has one extra tactical console, one less to fit a universal. It doesn't really change too much. It does give a little more damage, especially with this being the bug ship. I can run 4 critical consoles, which is near enough the most that you can have. You could put the, I think it's the Dyson reputation. No, it's not. It's the Romulan one, and I don't have it. It's in the bank. The Romulan console, and I think there's another one, the torpedo console that you get from the NX refit. You could put that in there for more crit. Personally, I don't think it's worth it on this particular ship. Starting to feel like death by loading screen. Well, hopefully at least I've been able to show you guys that you can copy over builds from one ship to another, even if they are completely different kinds of ships. And as I'm going to show you in just a second, don't really care whether this goes right or not, just quickly rush through. It doesn't really matter whether you've just copied a build over or not. The capability is still just the same, though to be fair my bug chip does a tiny bit more damage in burst, just a little less over time, so you can't quite survive as well. As you can see, plenty of damage, and this is, as you saw, with the exact same build, just altered slightly to fit on the ship, because sometimes you're going to have more stations that don't have the essential things in, other times you're going to have less and you may need to sacrifice one or two things. But so long as you can take the core elements of whatever your build is, now mine's an Oxabat just as an example, but whatever the core element of what you use, so long as that's transferable to another ship, you can copy the whole build over. Doesn't make any difference at all. Obviously the way that the ship flies, what actual spaces you've got, will make small differences here and there. It's just to get across to the fundamental principle that you can take one build and put it on another ship. Hope this has been helpful to you guys, and I will see you in the next video.